The massive Imperial ship hung in Earth's orbit like a dark crystal, its reflective surface catching the sun's rays. Down in New Geneva, Thomas Miller stood beside his wife Emma and their 12-year-old son James, watching the smaller transport vessel descend through the clouds. As Earth's leading diplomat for extraterrestrial relations, Thomas had been chosen for this unprecedented task. "Remember," he whispered to his family, "this is about making history." The transport landed with barely a sound, its smooth surface gleaming under the morning sun. The assembled crowd of diplomats, military personnel, and media held their breath. This was humanity's first major diplomatic exchange with the stellar empire since first contact 6 months ago. The ship's door opened with a soft hiss. 2 tall, silvery-skinned guards stepped out first, their ceremonial armor catching the light. Between them walked a small figure, Princess Aurora of the Stellar Empire. She looked almost human, except for her silvery skin and large purple eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The princess couldn't have been more than 10 Earth years old. She wore a simple white dress that seemed to flow like water, and her silver hair was braided with tiny crystals that chimed softly as she walked. Despite her young age, she carried herself with the dignity expected of royal blood. High Counselor Reed stepped forward first. "In accordance with our agreement, we welcome Princess Aurora to Earth. We accept this gesture of trust and friendship from the Stellar Empire." The taller guard spoke, his voice carrying an artificial translation. "The Empire entrusts you with our youngest princess. She will learn your ways, and you will learn ours through her. This is the will of the Empire." Thomas noticed something in the guard's tone, a hint of something that didn't match the ceremonial words. Was it disgust? Anticipation? He couldn't tell, but it made him uneasy. The guards turned and left without another word, leaving the young princess standing alone before the Earth delegation. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emma, always the one to follow her heart, stepped forward and knelt before the child. "Welcome to Earth, Aurora. Would you like to meet our son, James?" Aurora's large purple eyes studied Emma's face. When she spoke, her voice was clear and musical, her English perfect thanks to the translation device at her throat. "Yes, please. I would like that very much." James stepped forward, trying not to show his nervousness. He had been prepared for this moment, but facing an alien princess was different from all the practice sessions. "Hi," he said simply, giving a small wave. To everyone's surprise, Aurora smiled, a very human expression that transformed her alien features into something warm and relatable. She copied James's wave, though her movement was slightly stiff, as if she was trying something new. Later that evening, in the Miller's home, Thomas sat in his study reviewing the day's events. The media was already calling it the greatest diplomatic success in human history. The Stellar Empire, with technology centuries ahead of Earth's, had chosen to entrust them with one of their own. But something didn't add up. Why send a child? Why this specific child? The Empire had stated it was to foster understanding between their species, but Thomas had spent enough time in diplomacy to know that official reasons rarely told the whole story. He looked out his window, where in the garden, James was showing Aurora how to play with a simple ball. The princess seemed fascinated by the bouncing motion, her usual grace forgotten as she chased after it. Emma brought him a cup of coffee, following his gaze to the children. "She seems so normal," she said softly. "That's what worries me," Thomas replied. "The Empire has never shown interest in seeming normal before. They pride themselves on their differences from us. So why send us someone so adaptable?" "Perhaps," Emma suggested, "we should focus less on why they sent her, and more on making sure she has a real childhood here." Thomas nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this gift to humanity would prove to be more complex than anyone suspected. In the garden, Aurora's laugh rang out, a sound so human it was hard to believe she wasn't from Earth. Only her silvery skin shimmering in the setting sun reminded them of who and what she really was. 8 years had passed since Aurora's arrival on Earth. The silver-skinned princess, now 18, sat in the university library surrounded by books about human history. Her purple eyes moved quickly across the pages, absorbing information with the enhanced learning abilities her species possessed. But unlike her people, who learned purely for practical purposes, Aurora found herself emotionally invested in these human stories. James walked into the library, now a tall 20-year-old, and spotted her immediately. He'd grown used to finding her here, lost in books about Earth's past. Still studying the French Revolution? He asked, dropping into the chair beside her. Aurora looked up, her silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. "It's fascinating," she said, her voice carrying that musical quality that hadn't changed since childhood. "Your species fought so hard for the idea of equality. My people would never understand that." "Speaking of your people," James said carefully, "another diplomatic ship arrived this morning." Aurora's face showed worry, an expression she'd learned from humans, one that her own species would have considered a weakness. "They're checking on me again." "Yes. Father says they want to evaluate your development." The princess closed her book, her fingers tracing the cover. "They won't be pleased. I'm not developing the way they expected." She was right. The Empire had anticipated that exposure to human emotions would prove their theory about emotional weakness. Instead, Aurora had thrived. She topped her classes in both sciences and arts, showed remarkable emotional intelligence, and had even developed abilities that surprised her own people. Later that day, Aurora stood before the Imperial evaluators in the diplomatic chamber. Their tall, silver forms loomed over her, their faces showing the emotionless mask typical of their species. "Princess Aurora," the lead evaluator spoke, "demonstrate your current understanding of molecular physics." Aurora did more than that. She explained the concepts using human analogies, showing how emotion and scientific understanding could work together. The evaluators exchanged glances, a rare show of concern from her species. "You speak like them," one evaluator noted, disapproval clear in his tone. "I speak with clarity and passion," Aurora corrected him. "Is understanding not the purpose of my time here?" After the evaluation, James found her in their favorite spot, the rooftop garden of the diplomatic residence. She stood looking at the stars, her silvery skin glowing softly in the moonlight. "That bad?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "They think I'm becoming too human," she said. "But they're wrong about humanity, James. Your emotions don't make you weak. They make you incredibly strong. Every day, I see humans overcome impossible odds because they feel deeply enough to try." James watched her face as she spoke. Over the years, he'd seen her change from a reserved alien child into someone who could laugh, cry, and feel deeply. She'd kept her imperial intelligence and abilities, but had gained something his people saw as uniquely human: heart. "My father's scientists said humans would corrupt me," Aurora continued, turning to face him. "But they were wrong. I'm not corrupted. I'm complete. I can think like my people but feel like yours." "Do you know what that means?" James shook his head. "It means both our species are wrong about each other. Humans aren't primitive for having emotions, and the Empire isn't superior for suppressing them. We're just different parts of the same possibility." As if to prove her point, Aurora raised her hand, and the air around them began to glow with tiny points of light, an ability she discovered recently, combining her species' natural energy manipulation with human creativity. "Beautiful," James whispered, watching the lights dance around them. Aurora smiled, another perfectly human expression on her alien face. "This is why they're worried, James. I'm becoming something new, not quite human, not quite imperial. And I think that scares them more than any weakness ever could." High above them, unnoticed, an Imperial probe recorded their interaction, transmitting data back to the Empire about their princess, who was becoming far more than they had ever planned for. Commander Marcus walked quickly through the underground facility of Earth's defense intelligence, his footsteps echoing off the metal walls. In his hand, He clutched a data pad containing recently decoded Imperial transmissions. What he'd found had kept him awake for 2 nights straight. He found Thomas Miller in the main control room, discussing security protocols with other officials. "Sir," Marcus interrupted, "you need to see this immediately." Thomas excused himself and followed Marcus to a secure room. The commander placed the data pad on the table and activated its holographic display. Ancient Imperial text floated in the air, now translated to English. "We finally cracked their oldest encryption," Marcus explained. "These are messages from 10 years ago, just before they sent Aurora to Earth." Thomas read the first message, his face growing darker with each line. The Imperial High Command had never intended the princess as a gift of peace. They had sent her as a test, or more accurately, as bait. They wanted her to fail, Thomas said quietly, his hands gripping the edge of the table. They thought our emotions, our primitive way of life, would destroy her. They wanted to prove humanity wasn't ready for galactic civilization. "There's more." Marcus swiped to another message. "They chose Aurora specifically because she showed early signs of emotional capacity, something they consider a genetic flaw in their species. In the diplomatic residence above ground, Aurora was teaching James about Imperial energy manipulation. They sat in the garden, where she had created a small field of energy between her hands. "It's like holding water," she explained, "but the water is made of light and thought." The energy field pulsed with colors as she spoke, responding to her emotions, something that should have been impossible according to Imperial science. James watched in fascination. "Can all your people do this?" "They can create energy fields, yes, but not like this." Aurora shaped the energy into a small butterfly that flew around them. "They can't make it respond to feelings. They say emotions corrupt the purity of the energy." Their moment was interrupted by Thomas's arrival. Both young people could tell something was wrong by the way he carried himself. "Aurora," he said gently, "we need to talk." In his private study, Thomas showed them the decoded messages. Aurora read them silently, her purple eyes moving quickly across the text. James stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "So I was never a gift," Aurora said finally. "I was an experiment. They expected me to break down, to prove them right about humans." She looked up at Thomas. "But I didn't. I became stronger instead." "That's what worries me," Thomas replied. "These recent transmissions show the Empire is concerned about your development. You're displaying abilities they didn't think possible." Aurora stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors her people had never bothered to name. "They don't understand," she said softly. "They think emotions weaken our natural abilities. But they're wrong. Feelings don't corrupt energy. They enhance it, make it more powerful, more controlled." She turned back to them, her silver skin glowing in the fading light. "I can do things they never imagined because I don't fight my emotions. I embrace them like humans do." James stepped forward. "But why keep this secret for so long? Why not tell us their real plan?" "Because," Thomas answered, "they never expected to lose control of the experiment. According to these transmissions, they're now dealing with something they never planned for, a member of their royal family who proves their entire philosophy wrong." Aurora created another energy field, larger this time. Within it, images formed: Earth cities, Imperial ships, stars and planets swirling together. "They wanted to prove humanity would destroy me," she said, her voice firm. "Instead, humanity completed me. And that terrifies them more than any failure could have." The energy field pulsed with the strength of her conviction, filling the room with light that danced like the northern lights. In that moment, they all understood. The Empire's plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of proving humanity's weakness, they had created their own worst fear, a bridge between two worlds they had wanted to keep apart. The Imperial message arrived at dawn. The massive hologram of King Validar filled the main chamber of Earth's diplomatic center, his silver face stern and unmoving. Thomas Miller stood with Earth's Security Council, while Aurora and James watched from a side chamber. "We invoke the ancient law of succession." The king's voice boomed through the hall. "Princess Aurora must return to the Empire immediately." The council members exchanged worried glances. Thomas stepped forward. "Your Majesty, Aurora has lived on Earth for 18 years. Under both Earth and Imperial law, she has the right to choose her own path." The king's purple eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand, Ambassador Miller. This is not a request. The law of succession predates all other imperial laws. It cannot be refused." Aurora walked into the chamber, her head held high. Unlike the emotionless mask her father wore, her face showed clear determination. "Father," she said, her voice carrying clearly, "why now? After all these years?" "The Empire requires its heir," he replied coldly. "Recent events have made this necessary." James, watching from the side, noticed how the king avoided looking directly at his daughter. He was hiding something. "What recent events?" Aurora pressed. The king's hologram flickered slightly. "Your abilities have come to our attention. They must be properly contained and studied." "You mean controlled," Aurora corrected him. The air around her began to shimmer with energy, responding to her emotions. The king's eyes widened slightly at the display. The first real emotion he'd shown. "This is exactly why you must return," he said. "Your time among humans has created dangerous abnormalities in your imperial gifts." Thomas stepped forward again. "Your Majesty, if I may, Aurora's abilities aren't abnormalities. They're advancements. She's discovered ways to use imperial energy that your scientists thought impossible." "Impossible and dangerous are often the same thing, Ambassador." The king's voice grew harder. "You have 48 Earth hours to prepare the princess for transport. If she is not surrendered willingly, we will take appropriate action." The hologram vanished, leaving the chamber in tense silence. Later, in the research lab beneath the diplomatic center, James watched as Earth's scientists ran tests on Aurora's abilities. She stood in a controlled chamber, creating complex patterns of energy that responded to her emotional state. "It's remarkable," Dr. Taylor, the lead scientist, said as she reviewed the data. "The Empire's traditional energy manipulation is powerful but rigid. Aurora's emotional connection makes it more flexible, more adaptable. She can do things their centuries of technology haven't achieved." James watched as Aurora shaped the energy into a perfect model of Earth's solar system, each planet rotating exactly as it should. "That's why they want her back, isn't it? They're not worried about succession. They're worried about what she represents. A challenge to their entire way of thinking." Thomas agreed, entering the lab. "Our intelligence suggests the Empire's ruling class maintains control partly through their monopoly on energy manipulation. If their people learn that emotions enhance rather than weaken these abilities, they'd lose their power," Aurora finished, letting the energy display fade. She stepped out of the chamber, her face troubled. "But they're making a mistake. I won't help them suppress this knowledge." "They might not give you a choice," James said softly. "You saw how your father looked when you displayed your abilities. They're scared." Aurora turned to Thomas. "What are Earth's defenses like against Imperial weapons?" "Not good enough," Thomas admitted. "We've made advances, but their technology is still centuries ahead of ours." "Then we need a different approach," Aurora said. She created a small sphere of energy in her palm, its surface rippling with complex patterns. "They think human emotions make their abilities unstable and weak. I need to prove that the opposite is true, and I need to do it in a way they can't ignore." The energy in her hand pulsed brighter, reflecting in her determined purple eyes. Above them, invisible to Earth's sensors, Imperial ships were already moving into position around the planet. Time was running out, and Aurora knew she would have to make a choice that would change both worlds forever. In the hours before the Empire's deadline, Aurora stood in the reinforced testing chamber deep beneath the diplomatic center. Scientists and officials watched from behind thick observation windows as she prepared to demonstrate the full extent of her abilities. "Are you sure about this?" James asked through the intercom. "We've never tested your powers at full capacity." Aurora's silver skin gleamed under the harsh lights. "We're out of options. They need to understand what I've become." She closed her purple eyes and let down all the barriers she'd built over years of careful control. Energy began to flow from her, not in the rigid, controlled manner of imperial technique, but in waves that pulsed with emotion. The air itself seemed to come alive with swirling colors. Dr. Taylor stared at her instruments in disbelief. "These readings, they're off the scale. She's generating more power than any recorded imperial demonstration." The energy field expanded, filling the chamber with light. Unlike the cold, mechanical energy of the Empire, this power felt alive, warm, almost musical. Aurora opened her eyes, which now glowed like purple stars. "This is what they fear," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "The combination of imperial power and human emotion. They think it makes us unstable, but look." She raised her hands, and the energy formed into complex structures. DNA helixes, molecular patterns, even tiny replicas of living creatures, all moving and evolving in perfect harmony. "Impossible," whispered one of the imperial scientists who had been invited to observe. "Our study showed emotional influence would corrupt the energy patterns. But this is perfect control." James watched in awe as Aurora demonstrated abilities that went far beyond anything the Empire had shown. She wasn't just manipulating energy. She was creating with it, using it in ways that merged science and art, logic and emotion. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Thomas rushed into the observation room. "Imperial ships are entering the atmosphere. They're not waiting for the deadline." Aurora's concentration didn't break. If anything, the energy around her grew stronger. "Let them come," she said calmly. "It's time they saw what they're really afraid of." The energy field expanded beyond the chamber, passing through walls as if they weren't there. But instead of destroying or disrupting, it enhanced everything it touched. Computer systems ran faster. Plants in the facility's hydroponics lab grew stronger. Even the humans in the building felt more energized. "This is incredible," Dr. Taylor said, checking her readings. "She's not just using the energy. She's improving everything it touches, making it better, more efficient." Through the facility's cameras, they could see Imperial troops landing outside, their weapons ready. But as Aurora's energy field reached them, something unexpected happened. Their own energy-based weapons began to respond, not with destruction, but with harmony. "Don't you see?" Aurora's voice carried to everyone, human and Imperial alike. "This is what happens when you stop fighting emotion. It doesn't weaken us. It completes us." The Imperial troops stood frozen, watching as their weapons transformed from tools of destruction into something new, something that merged Imperial technology with the warmth of human feeling. James stepped closer to the chamber window. "Aurora, your father needs to see this. The whole Empire needs to see this." "They will," she replied, her glowing eyes fixed on something distant. "Because this is just the beginning." The energy field continued to expand, reaching higher into the sky where the Imperial ships hung like dark stars. As it touched each vessel, their cold, crystal surfaces began to pulse with warm light, as if awakening to a new possibility. In the chamber, Aurora smiled, a purely human expression that somehow made her power even stronger. She had finally understood why the Empire had really sent her to Earth, not to prove humanity's weakness, but because deep down, they knew their civilization needed what humans had never lost: the power to feel, to grow, and to change. Above them, the Imperial ship's weapons powered down, their crews experiencing for the first time what their princess had discovered: that true power comes not from suppressing emotion, but from embracing it. The King's massive flagship entered Earth's atmosphere, its crystalline surface darkening the sky above the diplomatic center. Unlike the other Imperial ships now bathed in Aurora's warm energy, this vessel remained cold and resistant, protected by ancient technologies. "Father comes himself," Aurora said, watching through the facility's windows. The energy field around her pulsed with complex emotions: love, determination, and a touch of sadness. James stood beside her, noting how the Imperial soldiers outside had lowered their weapons, still affected by their first taste of emotion-enhanced power. "What will you do?" "What I must," she replied, "but not what they expect." The flagship landed in the vast courtyard, and King Valadar emerged. He was taller than most Imperials, his silver skin almost metallic, his purple eyes hard as gems. He wore armor made of the same crystal as his ship, designed to resist any energy manipulation. "My daughter," his voice boomed across the courtyard, "you will cease this display and return to your people." Aurora walked out to meet him, her bare feet leaving traces of glowing energy on the ground. The difference between father and daughter was striking. His rigid, controlled presence against her fluid, living power. "Why do you really want me back, father?" she asked. "Is it truly about succession, or is it about what I represent?" "You represent a corruption of our ways," he responded. "Look at what human emotion has done to you. You twist our pure energy into these displays." Aurora raised her hand, creating a sphere of energy that contained both imperial precision and human warmth. "Is it corruption to evolve? To grow? Our people have stagnated, father. We stopped growing because we stopped feeling." "Feelings are weakness," the king declared, but there was something in his voice, a hint of uncertainty. "Then why do you fear them so much?" Aurora's energy field expanded, gently touching the edge of her father's protective armor. "If emotions make us weak, why does the Empire work so hard to suppress them?" Thomas and James watched from the facility entrance as Aurora took another step toward her father. Other Imperial ships hovered above, their crews watching in fascination as the princess challenged centuries of Imperial doctrine. "I'll show you what human emotion has truly given me," Aurora said. She closed her eyes, and her power changed. Instead of pushing against her father's defenses, it simply existed around him, inviting rather than demanding. The king's armor began to resonate with the energy, not fighting it but responding to it. For the first time in centuries, perhaps, the leader of the Stellar Empire felt something stir within him, a memory of what their people had lost. "This is impossible," he whispered, but his voice had lost its hardness. "No, father. This is what we were meant to be." Aurora created images in the air between them, scenes from Imperial history, showing how their civilization had grown more rigid, more controlled, more afraid of their own feelings over time. "We thought suppressing emotion made us stronger," she continued. "But look at what we lost. Look at what we could be." The energy field grew, encompassing both father and daughter. Where they stood, the very air seemed to sing with possibility. Imperial soldiers and Earth's defenders alike watched in awe as the energy transformed, becoming neither purely imperial nor purely human, but something new. "I won't return to be contained," Aurora said firmly. "But I will offer you a choice. Father, stay here. Let me show you what I've learned. Let me prove that there's nothing to fear from feeling." The king stood silent, his ancient armor humming with his daughter's power. Above them, the Imperial ships waited, their crews watching their leader face the very thing their civilization had run from for so long. James held his breath, watching the moment that would decide not just Aurora's fate, but perhaps the future of two civilizations. The choice hung in the air between father and daughter, between the old way and the new, between fear and hope. And in that moment, something remarkable happened. King Valadar, supreme ruler of the Stellar Empire, took one small step toward his daughter. 2 weeks after the confrontation in the courtyard, representatives from Earth and the Stellar Empire gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall. The massive chamber, specially built for this historic moment, hummed with anticipation. Aurora stood at the center of the hall, her father beside her. The king had removed his crystal armor, his silver skin now reflecting the same warm energy that surrounded his daughter. The change in him over the past weeks had shocked both humans and Imperials alike. Today, Aurora addressed the gathered delegates, We bridge not just two worlds, but two ways of being. Her voice carried easily through the hall, enhanced by the energy field that had become as natural to her as breathing. James watched from his place among Earth's delegation, remembering how far they'd come from that first day when a small alien princess had stepped out of a ship. Thomas and Emma sat beside him, pride evident on their faces. The Empire feared emotion would weaken us, Aurora continued. Earth feared imperial power would overwhelm them. Both fears were born of misunderstanding. Let me show you what understanding can create. She raised her hands, and the energy field expanded to fill the entire hall. But this time, she did something new. The power touched each person present, human and imperial alike, creating a bridge between minds and hearts. For one breathtaking moment, humans felt the pristine clarity of imperial thought, while imperials experienced the rich depth of human emotion. The effect was transformative. "This is what we can be together," Aurora said softly. "Not separate species fighting our natures, but partners learning from each other's strengths." Cain Valadar stepped forward, his voice carrying the new warmth he had discovered. "My daughter has shown us what we forgot centuries ago. In our drive for perfection, we lost something essential. Humans didn't corrupt her, they completed her." The king turned to face both delegations. "The Empire hereby recognizes Earth as a full partner in galactic civilization, and we recognize that our own civilization must change." Aurora created a new display above them, a vision of future cities where imperial technology and human creativity merge, where children of both species played together, where emotion and logic worked in harmony. "I choose both worlds," she declared, "not as a princess, not as an heir, but as a bridge. The Empire sent me to Earth to prove humanity's weakness. Instead, I learned humanity's greatest strength, the power to change, to feel, to grow." She looked at James, at the family that had raised her, at the humans who had taught her to embrace rather than fear her feelings. Then she looked at her father, at her birth people who were finally learning to feel again. "From this day forward," she continued, "I will serve as ambassador of unity, not just between Earth and the Empire, but between emotion and logic, between past and future." The energy in the hall pulsed with the truth of her words. Human delegates wiped tears from their eyes, while imperial delegates experienced, many for the first time, the power of being moved by words. Cain Valadar raised his hand, and to everyone's surprise, created his own small field of energy, one that carried a hint of warmth. "The Empire accepts this new path. My daughter has shown us that true strength lies not in rejecting change, but in embracing it." As the delegates stood to applaud, Aurora walked to James and her Earth family. "Thank you," she said simply, but the energy around her expressed what words couldn't: love, gratitude, and joy. "So what happens now?" James asked, smiling at the silver-skinned woman who had changed two worlds. Aurora looked out at the gathered delegates, at humans and Imperials beginning to talk and share experiences, at the first steps toward a true union of their civilizations. "Now," she said, her purple eyes bright with purpose, "we build something new, something neither of our worlds could have created alone." Above them, Earth's sun shone through the hall's crystal dome, its light mixing with Aurora's energy field to create a rainbow that touched everyone present, a perfect symbol of the bridge between worlds that had begun with a gift, grown through love, and blossomed into hope for all.